We ended with this text by Laura Geller. And I don't know, Mike, what do you think about this text? You don't have to start with this, but anyway, I just want to,
I'd actually like to start with it because I was able to get it up and it's in my in my document.
I'm glad you were able to get it up. Document file. Great, go forth then. I'll stop sharing, but I wanted other students to take for us to look at it one more time and to read. Maybe Mike, would you read it then?
In wrestling with texts, I feel less lonely. Wrestling with Torah is like making love. I get close enough to be wounded, and the text often hurt. But I've gotten close enough to be blessed. The astonishing moments of binding insight when the world suddenly looks forever different, when we discover wholeness in what would seem to be disparate and unconnected. Divinity is clearly present in these moments. By Laura Geller. Hi, everybody. And to preface today's talk, we're going to be talking about Leviticus verse 18, chapter 18, verse something or other, and also chapter 20, some verse in there too, which I may just offhanded just refer to it as the clobber text. And I think you'll get a really good sense of why I call it the clobber text in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to make sure everyone is sort of rested. You've gotten a chance to get something to drink. I do want to share that particularly for all of the talks that we're going to be doing, this talk I've been saving these as Word documents and I've been sending them to Rabbi Angel. So if you want a copy of the study guide that I've been using, they are available after class. So if you want to refresh back to them. So here we go with Leviticus, the clobber text. And I really want to first start out with an acknowledgement to Rabbi Michael Copeland, who many of you saw was the service leader at Shahar Zahav on Friday night. She does this amazing study guide called How Do You Solve a Problem Like Leviticus? And I borrowed liberally, with her permission, I borrowed liberally from it. So I just wanted to thank her before we even get started. By the way, I'm a photographer and I love photographing hummingbirds. So this is one of my hummingbird photographs, just to show off a little bit. But, you all were asked over the weekend, and there's a writing assignment that we're going to do this morning before we start anything to get us into the practice of finding meaning in text. You were all asked to find a song lyric and bring a song lyric to class this morning. And the questions that you wanted to answer were, what song lyric did you choose and what does it mean to you? I did it also. The song lyric I chose is a lyric from an REM song called Find the River. And the reason that I chose this song lyric is because when my best friend in the whole world died in the early 90s, this was the song that I put on my Walkman when I flew to Hawaii to sit on a beach and cry for a week to grieve him. So every time I hear the song Find the River by REM, the lyrics always make me think of Patrick. So that's what it means to me. So I'm wondering if we couldn't now take a few minutes for everybody while you're there at your desk or table or whatever, if you could take a few minutes to write down the song lyric that you chose and then briefly what that lyric means to you. And let's take about 5 minutes to do all that, just to give you a chance. We may take less time because it's a pretty dense Leviticus. The clobber text is a lot of talking. So how about if you if you write down the song lyric that you chose and why it means something, what it means to you. I was thinking I would sing to everybody during this period of time, but I think that would be most distracting and most unwelcome. Max, look at the mess. if you're done with your writing, if you want to, could you put a heart up in your corner, in reaction, could you do the heart reaction so I know that you're done?
I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi is pretty bad earlier, so can you repeat what exactly I have to write? I'm sorry for that.
Oh, no, Trung, we asked, the assignment was to pick your favorite song lyric
Oh,
and to write just really briefly what it means to you.
thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you, Rebecca. Oh, thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Jasmine. Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. And Simran, thank you. Thank you, Layla. I saw that. Thank you, Liz. Oh my gosh, Arden, everyone. Now they're all, I may get lost in all the hearts, which is not a bad thing. Thanks, Yen. Appreciate it. Thanks, Charu. Thanks, Maggie. I'm sorry your room is not cold. Thanks, thanks, B. I saw that, Reese. Great, thank you. Oh, thanks, Oliver. So I think that's pretty much everybody. I don't want to be that person that just picks somebody out randomly, but does anybody want to share what song they chose and briefly why it means something to you? Oh, please, Elizabeth.
You're on mute.
I think you're on mute, Elizabeth. We can't hear anything.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Now we can, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have my setup kind of wrong. Yeah, so I chose a song by or from Imagine Dragons, and particularly the lyrics "Whatever It Takes," because I love the adrenaline in my veins. Because I prefer to, because what I'm afraid of is that I will be like old and lying on my bed and dying, and I would be thinking about all the things I haven't tried because I was too scared that it's maybe like dangerous, or because people are telling me that it's not like the most like convenient and comfortable way. And I love opening like these new like doors and opportunities. It can be sports, it can be networking, it can be like whatever.
Thank you. Layla, I see you put your hand up.
Yeah, so one of my favorite artists is Elton John. I was really lucky to go to his final tour in Santa Clara with my siblings. Um, but so I chose from the song Your Song, I chose the lyrics. I know it's not much, but it's the best I can do. My gift is my song, and this one's for you. Um, I've just always really liked, I mean, and it's Bernie Taupin's lyrics, but I have always felt like it was just a very special song, and it never gets old. And what it means to me, I guess, is that we all have our ways of telling people we love them, our love languages. Um, and and then also in the context of loving people, but also just anything else, what might seem like not enough to you might be someone's very best that they're doing. Which is something that I try and remind myself a lot, that if I get irritated sometimes with people of thinking that, they're not putting in enough effort, or, they're not doing that, then it's something that my therapist reminded me is, well, what if that's their best effort? And that's like what they're doing is the best that they can. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Layla. Erica, do you mind if I put you on the spot to ask you?
Yeah, sure. One
you.
of my favorite artists is Black Country New Road, and around 2 years ago they released their second album, and my favorite song from there is called Concord. And the first verse, it goes, "Concord, this organ, the new one I'm forming. It's grown so persistent on you. By the morning, I'd fell to my feet. And the doctor said, we're unfortunately running out of options to treat. What a funny way to speak.
Mhm.
And I think that it's interesting hearing about like yearning so hard that you're like growing a new organ. I think that's so like robust, I guess. I think it's just like a lyrically genius song. And also I listened to it a lot during my first year at university. So I was kind of experiencing like growing pains a little bit, just like in a new area and environment. So whenever I listen to the song, it's very reminiscent of that time. But yeah, mostly I like this song because like the lyrics are so like I don't like they're so potent, I guess. Yeah.
Mhm. Thanks. Jason, I hate to put you on the spot, but you were the first one that threw hearts up there. So I thought, you want to share?
No worries. So the story, I mean, sorry, the song I chose was Black Star by Radiohead.
Oh,
It's like
God.
blame it on the black star, blame it on the falling sky, blame it on the satellite. So to me, this phrase kind of highlights the human tendency to like to play the blaming game when something goes wrong in life. And I often catch myself doing this, but I
Mhm.
eventually like realize that it's more productive to avoid placing blame and it's better to just accept what has happened and like finding ways to get over it.
Great. Oliver? I literally am just randomly picking, so
Yeah, works for me. When I first thought of this, I kind of had two in mind, but I could kind of boil it down to the one that I prefer more,
Mhm.
which was Nature Boy by Nat King Cole. And more
you guys have some
importantly,
great song choices, by the way. I'm really liking them. So go ahead. Sorry.
all good. Thank you. And the main line from here is the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. And I was like, my first thought is like, oh, how great. But also in terms of like, I guess my own tendencies, I have a tend to be like super self-critical and kind of like devolve, I guess, a little bit into like self-loathing and hatred. So I was like, it's both an important reminder to like, go out to others in a loving manner, but also to yourself, which I appreciate a lot. So
Thanks. How about you, Reese?
So I chose the song Build Me a House by Ramon, and the lyric that I chose is shook hands with all of my vices. And I think it's more of a message like to myself that like at some time you have to just accept like things that maybe you thought were flaws in yourself and just move on.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Thank you. Arden.
I picked this like song and lyric more because of like the context of it, but the song is The Show Must Go On by Queen. Um, and it was released like not that long before Freddie Mercury passed away. And he was like very, very ill when he was recording it. So the lyric that I was like drawn to was my soul is painted like the wings of butterflies. Fairy tales of yesterday will grow but never die. And it's just very poignant in context. So that's why I picked that.
Well, I'm gonna keep. I'm really interested in this. So, who hasn't been called on that would like to share?
Can I share?
Please, Beatrice, please.
The song I chose is called Tell Me by Neil Francis because, and I chose it because it's one of the songs that I just kept skipping and skipping and skipping. Because I had added it once because it was on my Spotify Discover Weekly, but then one time I took the time to actually listen to it and I absolutely loved it and it related to my current situation. It's basically about like just being vulnerable with your partner and like genuinely just like saying what you want, like not being afraid to be rejected. And that really resonated with me. Like once I started being very assertive, I've found a lot of good results in my life as a result.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Yes, so I chose a song by Phoebe Bridgers called I Know the End. And the lyrics I chose is either way, we're not alone. I'll find a new place to be from. And it just really, I don't know, I really related to it because after I moved away to SF for college, my parents moved away to Chicago and so did my sister. So I was kind of in this weird place where I didn't exactly know where home was.
Mhm.
So the lyrics, I'll find a new place to be from, just really hit home where I'll be like, okay, I'll make my own home. So yeah.
Thank you. Georgia?
I chose the song Wild Time by Blood. And the lyrics are look around, there's nothing left to keep by the bottles that broke you from the solace that you seek. I this is just kind of random, but like I got a new therapist and she's like so awesome. And she's like totally changing my perspective like on myself and like just kind of introducing me into this new journey of like achieving self-security and like um finding the most in what I can do alone and like by myself. I love this song in high school, so it's always kind of like been in my ear. But I feel like those lyrics are kind of like they kind of emphasize that like achieving self-security sort of involves looking around at like what is broken or what may be considered broken in the past.
Thank you. Trung?
Well, I tried to come up with a lyric because like I listen mostly to like electronic music or like most music I listen doesn't have a lyric at all. So
Mhm.
I can't really participate in this activity because like I don't have any like favorite lyric because like right now it's been like a whole year and listening more or less exclusively to like soundtrack music, electronic dance music rather than lyrics. So yeah, so I don't know which lyric is my favorite, unfortunately.
Simran?
Yeah, so I actually selected the song Rolling in the Deep by Adele. And it kind of like the lyric is we could have had it all rolling in the deep. Mainly it's like this line really connects with me because it kind of, like helps me acknowledge like the opportunities and relationships that have shaped my life's journey. And it also kind of helps me introspect on the experiences and learnings and then learn from them and make my life's course better as I move on.
Thank you. Lydia, did you go or no?
So my favorite song lyrics are actually from a Brazilian song, so it's in Portuguese, but
Okay.
I translated it and it's a song that I wish could be in every language. So the specific lyrics I like are sometimes happiness takes a while to come. That is when we can't stop dreaming. A fighter doesn't run away from war. No one will come in the way who was born to win.
Do you
And
would you mind saying it in Portuguese, like in the original lyric?
oh yeah, I only have it pulled up in the here I can pull it up in Portuguese really quick
Mhm.
so I can say it exactly how it is. Okay. Às vezes a felicidade demora a chegar, aí é que a gente não pode deixar de sonhar. Guerreiro não foge da luta e não pode correr, ninguém vai poder atrasar quem nasceu para vencer.
Right. And why is that? What does that mean to you? The lyric.
It's just really empowering to me. The whole song is about like keeping your head up, and it's a song that I listen to when I'm sad, and it just always motivates me and never fails to like
Mhm.
make me think that I can keep going. So yeah.
Thank you. Chiraru? Chirayu, did you have a talk to share? And Yan, how about you?
The song that I chose is called Take It by Caffeine. And the lyrics are I watch the moon, let it run my mood, can't stop thinking of you. I watch you. Now I let it go, and I watch as things play out. So long. Nice to know you. I'll be moving on. So it's like I relate to this song because it reminds me of my past relationship with somebody just because it was kind of toxic and it was hard to let go. But as I like watch or like watched myself and how I like evolved within that relationship, it wasn't good for me. So I finally like let go.
Great. Thank you. And I think I probably embarrassed everyone and called on everybody.
Yeah, could I just go next? I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
please. Yeah, yes, Shriver, please.
Right. So the song I chose was Marry Me by Bruno Mars. And the lyrics I chose, it's a beautiful night. We're looking for something dumb to do. Hey baby, I think I want to marry you. Is it the look in your eyes or is it the dancing juice? Who cares, baby? I think I want to marry you. And it is close to my heart because this was the song my brother-in-law proposed to my sister in last year, and my sister just got married to it. And I've been just hearing it on loop, and it brings out a positive vibe to me and a very positive emotion and a very happy memory to it. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So that I think is everybody. And I just want to congratulate you on sort of writing your first drosh, writing your first piece of hermeneutics, writing your first finding text that means something to you and writing why. So I just wanted to give you all sort of a moment in time now as we go along the course to sort of take away some of your fear about whether or not you think you're going to be able to write something with meaning. Clearly you all are. So I want to thank you and congratulate you. And also that's sort of to softening the blow of getting into what I think is some really difficult text today when we're talking about Leviticus. But I want to go back to one. I thought this was a really wonderful thing that the rabbi brought in at the very beginning. I get close enough to be wounded, and the texts often hurt. I think that's probably the most brilliant way to sort of explain to you all how difficult it is for me to talk about this text from Leviticus, and how difficult it is for me to find meaning in text from the Torah. So if you feel like this is hard work, it is often hard work, and particularly when you feel close enough to be wounded by the text. So here we are, we're talking about Leviticus 18:22 and then also 20:13. And I really want to stress this idea about wrestling with troubling text, because that's what we're going to do for the next 25, 30 minutes is wrestle with some very troubling text. And the text specifically is this: do not lie with a male as one lies with a woman. It is at abhorrence. If a man lies with a male as one lies with a woman, the two of them have done an abhorrent thing. They shall be put to death. Their blood guilt is upon them. And I really want to point out this word right here. In Hebrew, the word is toevah, 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 and that means abomination. Then there's other versions of that same text, even in the Christian Bible, in the King James Version. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind, it is abomination. And if a man also lie with mankind as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. And that's the big word, toevah, abomination. I can't say it any plainer than the verses themselves. It's a really difficult verse. It's really quite powerful. It's quite violent. It's quite mean, and it's quite direct. There's no way to sort of mince words or figure out, maybe they mean something different. They're very clear, this word toeva, about abomination. So these verses have done their fair share of psychological and physical damage and have indeed led to the deaths of countless people over centuries who did not conform to a heteronormative or gender paradigm. Words hurt. And in this case, words can hurt a lot. So what I would like to do before we even get into really dissecting the text is to ask you all to do what we did last week and to go into Havruta. Havruta, not Ra. It should be a T. Into Havruta. Havruta. And talk about that verse. Do not lie with a male as one lies with a woman. It is an abhorrence. It is an abomination. So when we split you up into pairs, the 4 questions I'd like you to talk about with each other is, are you familiar with this reading at all? Have you heard this before? Where have you heard this? And in your pairs, like, what's your first uncensored reaction to this reading? Like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you read hear that phrase, that word? And lastly, what unanswered questions do you have from reading this line? Do not lie with a male as one lies with a woman. It is an abhorrence. So I'll copy the questions and put them in the chat. But these are the 4 things I'd like for you to talk about just for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then when we come back, we'll talk about that and then dive into the text, okay? Everyone's clear about the instructions? Time to go to Chavruta. I'll stop the screen share after I copy this. Okay. And I'll put that in the paste in the chat of the questions.
Okay, hi.
Hi, am I supposed to join room 2?
That's with me and you.
Oh, okay. Ha, ha, ha. Wow, this is great. Yeah. What you're reminding me of is I had a friend about 50 years ago who came from a very Orthodox family.
Mhm.
And how he navigated this was that he never had sex lying down.
It's actually it's actually in there. Yeah, like, is it a gotcha moment or is it being completely and totally adherent to Torah?
Yeah, that's what he felt like. So he only had sex standing up or kneeling.
And when we were doing in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we started getting really, really good epidemiologic data, and we're getting a really good sense of how the epidemic was exploding again in San Francisco. There was we did a national study between San Francisco, New York, Chicago, and LA, and discovered that on average, about 50% of gay men never engage in anal sex ever. It's just not, it's not a practice that they do, either as a couple or singularly. So the idea that penetrative anal sex is what defined for them what it meant to be gay wasn't even on their menu. And so that took the number of possible risk encounters, it sort of cuts it in half. Like, if they're not engaged in unprotected anal sex, that means half the community isn't at risk, because oral sex was not a risk at all. And so it really, really helped clarify, like, how prevalent and how risky unprotected anal sex was in some of these major cohorts.
Are you going to say that again for them?
I will, because it's fascinating. Michael's text was great, and I went through. I'm only going to skim through a lot of it because it's so dense.
Totally.
But
yeah,
I want to get them to the end about, how do you take text and figure out meaning for you?
Yeah.
I think Michael does a great job. She's like, look, we got Ruth, we've got David, we've got Jonathan, we've got all these other expressions. And we don't tell parents to stone their kids.
When she shows them the different interpretations, they've just never seen anything like that before. Most. But then again, this group seems to have a little bit more familiarity.
Can I just show you something? Look at this. This is my floor right now because there is snow everywhere from him. He's taken one of his toys and it has destroyed it.
Whoa.
I get him indestructible toys.
Tell me what time you want me to bring them back.
I think in about 3 minutes.
Oh. Wow. That's a lot of mess.
Yeah. But that's Max.
Wow. Is he new to you?
No, I've had him for it'll be a year in July.
Okay.
Yeah. He was 60 pounds when I got him. He's now 75.
Mm.
He's a big dog.
Wow.
He's a big cuddle kitten though.
Well, that's so nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, my dog is very sweet, but is not a very good cuddler.
My mother let me buy her a big, really sweet puppet dog.
Oh, that sounds so nice.
So I hope they wrote down not only I hope that they wrote down their song stuff and song lyric, because that was their writing assignment.
We'll remind them.
Mm-hmm. I'll remind them, because that's an actual assignment.
Yeah. And it's in the it's in their module as such. It's in like week 2. Let's see where it is. Yeah, 2 people have submitted something. So it says Monday's overnight reading. This was for last week.
Mm-hmm.
This was for yesterday. They were supposed to read last night. Taurus Stands on Love. And Tuesday in class, finish up, choose lyric from favorite song, write what it means to you and why.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a place to submit it.
I'll
And,
remind them.
and it's due at midnight tonight.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah, it's due at midnight tonight.
I'll remind them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to give them a 1-minute warning?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But once I do that, they'll start to come back, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, this was a fun assignment. I enjoyed thinking about it. And what you got me to get to is something I never thought about before, which is how in my little boy brain, my favorite song is queer. And it's amazing that it never, which I don't know if you know Fats Waller had a song, Your Feet's Too Big.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
No, I don't know it.
Your feet's too big. I really hate you because your feet's too big. Mad at you because your feet's too big.
Huh.
Sing the rest of it later, but this is so helpful for me, so thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. I think everybody's probably going to be wandering in any moment now.
I wanted to ask to clarify what chapter and verse it was, just so I write it down properly in my notes.
It is, just to be really clear, we're talking about Leviticus 18:22.
Okay.
And Leviticus 20:13.
Okay.
It's kind of amazing that so much of our clobber text about homosexuality is based on just those 2 little verses. So how was oh yeah, Oliver, yes.
So this is both a question to you, Mike, and as well to Rabbi Angel as well, because I don't know if this is necessarily within the scope of things. So I also wanted to ask, I guess, going into the realm of Christianity as well, because I know there's been, at least from what I remember, there were certain, I don't know if it was letters from Paul, but it was like a discussion of like, oh, there are certain rules that you won't have to follow that Jews are bound by, and it was like, why
don't you put a pin on that, because we're going to get to that.
Okay, sweet. All right.
When we sort of disentangle the repercussions and sort of interpretation of those 2 very simple verses.
Gotcha.
So can I, for a show of hands, was there anybody that had never heard these verses in some form or other, or had everyone heard some sort of iteration of these verses before? Anybody not? Had anyone never read this or heard this? A little bit? Okay. Okay. Reese, how was your discussion in your, I'm most interested, what was your first uncensored reaction to this reading? to that line about abomination or about abhorrence?
My first instinct was to like question like why? Like, yeah, I feel like there wasn't like an elaborate like explanation or something. They just kind of stated it and I was like, wait, why though? But in terms of our discussion, like me and Arden and Elizabeth were in a group, and Arden brought up this interesting point that I also saw and forgot about, but that you know how over time the texts have been interpreted and the initial interpretation was supposed to be men shall not lay with boy, not men shall not lay with man. So that was something that we discussed.
Oh, great. Maggie, how about just like a few of them? Maggie, how is your group?
Yeah, we talked about like how when we look at this text, we just kind of think why, and we want to know the context of the text, and like we feel like the passages don't really give context as to why this might be wrong. It just says this is how it is.
Great. Erica?
Same with us, our group, we mostly want to know why this happened in the first place, and like I don't know if there was like an experience that maybe like made this happen. But I think we had like a general, like we heard it around before, I think.
Did the text make anybody angry just hearing it? Like, did anyone have like an angry response? Like, Beatrice, I see you raise your hand. Simran, I saw you do it also. As a queer man, that verse makes me so angry because I don't understand why. What is the point of saying picking at it, like, why are you picking on gay men? Why are you picking on a man having sex with another man and making it an, abhorrent, having it be sinful, having it be so terrible of an act? For me, still to this day, I have this reaction that's right here. It's just visceral. I just get furious reading it still. So Yen?
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what you were saying because back then there was so much like sin going on other than like man should not lie with man, because it's like there's more problems in the world than another man being in love with another man. It's like, why do you care so much? And it's just like people would murder other people, or people will commit like robberies and stuff like that. So it's just like, what is the point of this being in the book rather than like something more important?
And if you didn't get a chance to do last night's reading, that piece that was written by the young queer rabbi from New York around Torah stands on love, where his comment was this verse doesn't talk about love. It doesn't talk about like the expression of why men would be with men, or why women would be with women, or why queer folk would be with queer folk, that it just seemed completely devoid of like humanity. And it just felt so painful. Layla? And you guys, actually, if you want to, just unmute and just break in at any point. So Layla, go ahead.
I wanted to add a couple of things. I was in a group with Maggie and Yen, and we were also saying how it's interesting from a feminism standpoint that like women weren't even seen as equals or as full beings at the point of being written, that it's like when you look at it, you're like, well, what about lesbians? Because that's not mentioned. And so it's kind of this like almost loop around of, it was written by men for men, and for them to read and interpret, and so it's kind of just you see with that, it's like I'm sure they would have meant the same thing, but and they even mention womanhood or woman, but then they don't. It's men cannot lie with men, but not woman can't lie with women.
Right.
So you're like, interesting that it's like women maybe weren't even seen as important enough to mention, or they weren't included in this. And then just also from like a historical standpoint, how around like in the ancient times in Greece and like all these places, it was like there was this idea that at some point that men should be with men, and it was again against women, that women are inferior and everything, and that it's like the best pairing and truest pairing would be man with another man. And there was even, relationships between like these philosophers and their students. And so it's interesting how it's all like it was going on, it's always been a thing, and how it's interpreted just in so many different ways.
So as sort of an aside, you all have hit on a lot of the things that are going to show up on the slide presentation in a bit, but just on the gender paradigm alone, if you think about the basis of homophobia, it's on some levels, it's about sexism. What's the worst thing a man could be is to be a woman, is to be passive, is to be a bottom, is to be not guy, which is to top, which is to be the actor, right? That's the basics of women to women, is so not there. I'd like to say that it changed a lot between, 2000 BCE and the 1900s, but even in Victorian England, the prohibitions about homosexuality really didn't touch prohibitions against lesbianism, because women's sex doesn't matter. It's what the guys do that matter. And that patriarchy, that sort of that paradigm of males mattering and women being inferior, it's just infused throughout our DNA and even our sacred text. And it's one of the things that I really react against. You guys, how about if I go to some of the question of answering why is it there and what's the context for it being there? I will let you know that this is all from a section of Torah called the Holiness Code. And what's important about the Holiness Code is it was all this code that was laid out in Torah that was trying to help the Israelites be different than their neighbors. It was all this code about behavior and morality and laws that was to separate them. So, I think you've heard some of the codes that have been out there about, if your child's disobedient, you can, stone them to death. The idea around not, pigskin, shellfish, the prohibition against pork, and issues of women menstruating and sex and incest and idolatry and bestiality. It's all this code around how to structure a society that was separate from its neighbors. Because remember, what was unique about Judaism and what was happening in the Israelites at this time is they were going towards being monotheistic, having a belief in one God, not polytheism with many gods, but one God. And so there were a lot of this laws about really creating a fence around them, saying this is what we do to be different and to be sacred or to be holy. I want to suggest that what you all just did and sort of your reaction to it was you all did this. You were talking about intersectional theology. It's a critique of theology critiquing theologies that justify the abuse of others, that talk about gaps of inequality, discrimination against groups. Intersectional theology necessitates resistance to dominating powers. And in this case, this clobber text, as you know, is the core text that says why gay men shouldn't have equal rights, why lesbians shouldn't have equal rights, why trans individuals shouldn't have equal rights, why gender nonconforming communities, why non-binary communities are less than or should not be treated with the same civil and social rights and legal rights as heteronormative straight people do. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I have a question regarding this. I live in a Christian Catholic country, and sometimes what I've noticed is that some people actually try to like justify the hate, that they are doing it actually for the well-being of the queer people, that they wanna like show them the like the correct path and stuff, because the Bible says that or like what the people the way the people interpreted it is that you should like show them the correct way and stuff. Would it be an example of this theology?
Yeah, well, actually, the whole idea that we need to be fixed, that queer people need to be fixed, and the point of a good theological existence would be for you as a straight person to show me the error of my ways as a queer person, and your job is to create a society that fixes me. But for folks on this Zoom call who are queer, I don't need fixing. I mean, I'm created, B'Tselem Elohim. I'm created in the image of the divine, and I don't think the divine makes mistakes. And I am sacred. I am not only in the image, but I sort of am the divine in that sense. And I don't need to be fixed. I don't need a theology that tries to fix me. I need a theology that embraces me, that holds me. And so I think that, you know, the tension in Christianity is very much around some of that fix the behavior, love the sinner, but hate the sin. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression, but you know, we love queer people. We just don't love what they do. You know, you can be queer, but why do you have to shove my face in it? Be so upfront about it. Why do you have to have gay pride? Why do you have to hold hands? Why do you want equal rights? You know, all those things. Like, why do you demand to be accepted as being different when we think you should convert to be the same? And that all stems from, all that theology really has its roots in that first line of Leviticus, you know, that man shall not lie with man as like a woman, because it's an abomination. So an entire theology gets built out of that little line that creates people that are better than and people that are lesser than. And I will suggest that as a queer man, I reject that by my very being. And I embrace rejecting that by my very being. But we'll get to some resolution at the end. But in the packet that you got, that the study guide from Rabbi Copeland, the idea around the importance of thinking about queering text is that, you know, when you queer text, you create theologies that challenge traditional notions of gender and relationship. I mean, that's what makes it so dynamic and so threatening and so powerful and so, you know, makes you feel alive. Like, my job is to challenge traditional notions. It also brings about a new approach to pastoral care. Like, how do we treat each other? Is my job to fix you and to change your sexual orientation or gender identification or your pronouns? Is that my job? Or is it my job to meet you where you're at and honor you where you're at and think about a whole new way of doing pastoral care? Just means how we treat each other, you know, how we treat each other and care for each other, particularly in times of need, right? And lastly, when we look at theology and challenge it with this sort of queer lens, it's to bring in awareness of particular political struggle and paradigms of power and oppression. Like, looking at this text alone, just immediately saying, where are the women? You know, why don't you talk about women right away? It's challenging, you know, a paradigm of power and oppression. So I was going to ask you all these questions, but you did this already. You know, when you look at a critical analysis of this text, it requires a willingness to look at both the context, like, what's the intent of this? Why is this there? And the content, like, it doesn't sit there alone on a page with nothing else around it. Like, tell me the context before I find meaning. And the second may seem a little kind of loopy, but bear with me for a second. It's parallax. And parallax, if all of us were standing outside right now and a bird jumped into the middle of us, if we were all in a circle and a bird was in the middle of us and did something, each person's perspective of that bird doing something is going to be unique to each of those persons, right? And that's parallax. It's like almost the infinite number of views one can have of a specific thing or activity or event, or in this case, text. Like, which angle, whose perspective? Is it my perspective as a cis white male? Is it my perspective as a gay man? Is it my perspective as someone who's in recovery? Is it your perspective as a young woman, as a young queer, as a college student, as someone in a foreign country, as someone on Zoom, you know, when it's early in the morning? Like, when we challenge and do critical analysis, it's not just the context. It's not just what surrounds it on the page, but who's looking at that page. And you all did a really great job of doing that sort of critical analysis by saying, well, why? Why would they say this? Well, let's see why they would say this, okay? And if anybody here on the Zoom call has never heard this expression before, it's that if you have 3 Jews in a room, you'll have 5 opinions. that there is no such thing as a single Jewish interpretation of anything. Anything. Talk about parallax, but there is no single definitive sort of canonical, like this is it. So in medieval times, this very famous comment to Rashi, suggested the act discussed is heterosexual intercourse. And so the disconnect is you've got men trying to do straight sex, and that doesn't work. And that's where he comments on this passage and says, he inserts like an applicator into a tube of cosmetics. So, I mean, it's kind of graphic, but you get the idea. Rashi's focused on the physical act of what this is prohibiting. And it's not possible to replicate heterosexual sex in queer setting, right? In between two men. That's not how it works. So for traditional Jewish interpreters, anal intercourse between men is clearly prohibited by this text, but no other sexual act is mentioned explicitly at all. So that's one medieval commentator. Well, some of the other folks have said, who's an actor, like who's the top, who's the dominant partner, and who's the receiver, like who's the passive partner. And this thing is really talking about gender roles, to be the top, to be the active partner is the male role, and to be the bottom, to be the passive person is the female role. And so the whole question of this text is about confusing gender roles. And why would that be prohibited? Why would that bother folks? Well, one of them is because acting, the actor is wasting his seed. It's not going into someone for whom it could make for a baby, right? Procreating is Torah's first mitzvah, be fruitful and multiply. And this is clearly an act that's not going to allow for reproduction. So I will point out that later sources don't prohibit sexual acts between married folks that can't result in pregnancy, but it's really particular here. So it's a bit limiting and stifling. And there's also a thing about both parties, well-defined roles for men and women were still central to living a legally prescribed Jewish life. So one of the things that may be prohibited is disrupting social order. That may be why this is there. The other one is the word toava. What does toava mean? One traditional Jewish commentary says toava is an acronym for one which leads one astray. One is that something that offends order. And one is a violation of a socially constructed background. So the idea of power dynamics, men and women, coupling, reproduction. But I did a little research. And toava in Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, it appears 117 times, and 78 times it refers to false idol worship. So not at all about sex, but the majority of times it shows up, it's about false idol worship. 18 to sex in a negative fashion, 10 to prostitution, and 7 to male sex. So the majority of time that word abomination is used, it's not even about male to male sex. So again, in context, toava seems to have a couple of other different meanings. And if you take out the Psalms and Proverbs, 80% of the time that they use that word in the Hebrew Bible, it's directly related to false worship, to idol worship, which for a group that's now monotheistic, that wants to worship just one God, they're surrounded by tribes and other people that worship many gods. And so false idolatry, false God worship was a big thing. That was a big no-no. And just a really interesting fun fact, in Genesis, the word was used to describe Egyptian prejudices against eating with the Hebrews, Hebrew shepherds in general, and sacrificing to Yahweh. So this word abomination, which we hear all the time about gay sex, gay men, queers, lesbians, trans, it's an abomination. Well, toava, in fact, also dealt with, Egyptian prejudices about eating with the Israelites. So why? Oh, and here we go. And particularly, here you go, Layla. Women are barely mentioned in traditional responses, as sex between women is considered a mere indecency, but not a prohibition. So sexually speaking, our ancestors believed that nothing is really happening when two women are having sex. It has no, there's no seed to be spilled. There's no semen. So there's no possibility of babies. And, male to male sex has always posed more of a threat to men. and men were the ones who dictated their society's response. The Israelites were a patriarchy. It was men ruling. We hear about the female leaders, but the matriarchs, but the patriarchs were the ones who wrote things down and got things, had incredible access and power. Perhaps men found the idea of women with women's sex titillating and not competitive, and therefore it didn't threaten them. It didn't threaten their manhood. So that's just a brief idea of what happened with old Jewish commentators. But here's some contemporary stuff. So here's what I talked about the context, about the holiness code. The Israelites were meant to be different in the ways that they ate, spoke, and behaved, and had sex. It could be in context that these verses were merely trying to separate the Israelites from people that were having other practices around them that might lead them to worshiping other gods. So all things leading to monotheism. This for me is the one that really gets me the most, is that it's such a selective reading. It misses the crux of the holiness codes. These passages are about love, justice, holiness, and respect. And also, let me take this thing off. Have you ever noticed that of all the things in the Old Testament that are prohibited, this is the one that everyone goes to? Christians, non-Christians, everyone, they go to this one alone. But they never question the idea about wearing, polyesters and cotton, right? They never talk about mixed fabrics. They never talk about pork. They never question their bacon eating. They never question, whether or not you should stone your child if they're disobedient. It's just this one. And so one has to say, why do you hate us so much? Why is this one act so abhorrent to you that it stands out and has lived beyond everyone else wanting to it? And I think part of it is how deeply ingrained homophobia is and sexism is to all of our cultures from BCE all the way into 2024. I really want to rush through because I want to get us to this very part at the end. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to all this. This is all in the document that you've got. But lastly, I do want to use this one. Some gay men, some men who have sex with men, who are very strict Jews, read this passage and say, okay, I'm never going to have anal sex, ever. And about 50% of gay men actually, in a study that we did about 20 years ago across the major gay epicenters in the US, but not all gay men have anal sex at all. Anal sex is not what defines what it means to be gay. And so this idea that if you prohibit this activity, then we're going to outlaw gay, this is not, anal sex does not make one gay. You don't ever have to have sex ever to be queer. Queer is a frame of mind. It's a way of thinking and being in the world. So, the idea that if I don't have anal sex, I still am completely and totally following Torah. So our theology needs to lead us to action. So I think the question that I want to leave with you all is, what impact does as a group, does our understanding of this text have on our community's liturgy, our ceremonies, our pastoral work? If we reject the text outright, what do we replace that text with? If we don't believe that men having sex with men is an abomination, what in your mind replaces that? Is it sacred that men can love men? Is it sacred that women can love women? Is it sacred that you can have trans expression as a legitimate human being next to you? And if that's the case, then our theology leads to action about how we interpret. How does this reading affect the rights of LGBTQ folks? I will share with you this, that while many communities and individuals struggle profoundly with Leviticus, myself included, Leviticus is no longer the prime determinant for LGBTQIA inclusion in modern Jewish life at all. In fact, the progressive denominations, Reform, Renewal, Reconstructionist, and Conservative, which is about 90% of American Judaism, all welcome queer people into congregations and even into the rabbinate, which is when you want to study to become a rabbi. So, and within those denominations, the actual degree of welcoming depends on the region and the community, but many urban centers boast an LGBTQ synagogue like Shahar Zahav, and specifically serve the needs of this population while welcoming all. So you can see that even though this text takes up so much of the airspace, for Jews, particularly for Reformed Jews, Reconstructionist Jews, conservative Jews, it doesn't. And so it's sort of a sea change. There's a prayer I'd like, if everyone could unmute, I would like it if everyone would just read along with me. This is from the Siddur. And Leviticus, the holiness codes, which teach us about love and morality and decency and community, where you find the clobber quote about the abomination, it lives in the context of the holiness code. So this is written by Rabbi Lisa Edwards, and it's in the Siddur. If everyone, you want to read along with me, we'll start here, right? We are your gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender children.
You must not seek
vengeance nor a grudge against the children of your people. That's in Leviticus. That's in the holiness codes. We are your bi, trans, lesbian, and gay parents. Revere your mother and father, each one of you. Again, Leviticus. We are elderly lesbians, bisexuals, gay men, and transgender people. Camille, would you read the Leviticus line?
You shall rise before the aged and show deference to the old.
Eli, would you redo the next piece?
We are the stranger. You must not oppress the stranger. You shall love the stranger as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Layla, how would you start with we are lesbian, gay?
We are lesbian, gay, trans, and bi Jews. You must not hate your brother or sister in your heart.
Right. And Simran, will you do the next one, please?
Is it the one where your cursor is at the moment?
Yes, we are lesbian, gay, yes.
So we're lesbian, gay, trans, and bi victims of gay bashing and murder. You may not stand idly when your neighbor's blood is being shed.
Thank you. And Lydia, will you do the next one?
We are your bi, gay, trans, and lesbian neighbors. You must not oppress your neighbor. You must judge your neighbor justly. You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Thank you. So I wanted to close with that prayer because when you ask the context of that line about abomination, it appears in all the text in Leviticus, which has all these other lines: loving your neighbor as yourself, not oppressing your neighbor, not standing idly when your neighbor's blood is being shed. So the context really does matter, that this holiness code is much bigger than the text that would just say that me as a gay man, I'm an abomination. So I know I went really, really fast through all that, and I know it may be a bit overwhelming. So please grab a copy of the Word document that's going to be posted tonight. And before I go, I will be remiss to remind you that by midnight tonight, your writing assignment for today's class is due by midnight tonight on your song lyric and what it means to you. So that's in your module, but that's a writing assignment. So this is just the last thing I'll say is you've been forewarned. So it's due by midnight tonight. And tomorrow, we are going to go to a much lighter, I think one of the most beautiful passages. It's going to be much lighter than the clobber text. It's not going to be about homophobia. It's going to be about how good it is to be with our brothers and sisters. That's what we're going to about with the Hine Matov. So, and for the folks who read Shahar Zahavit's that opening song where everybody was had their arms around each other and were swaying when they were singing Hine Matov, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So we will do a writing assignment tomorrow when class begins. But I really appreciate you all just sitting through a really, really tough and direct lecture. But thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Everyone take yourselves off mute. Thank Mike. Thank Eli. And it's 3:20. Please be back at 3:30 after you say thank you and goodbye. Please be back at 3:30 for our session in preparation for our 4 o'clock guest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Eli.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
Thank you, Eli.
Jamal.
Bye.